Welcome to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani. Also on Twitter and Periscope. At Vin Armani is my handle there. Also, we are streaming live on the Facebook page of our wonderful content partner, Activist Post. So that's facebook.com/Activist Post. Well, it's 10 a.m. Pacific time on Monday, and we are coming to you from fabulous and still relatively cool Las Vegas, Nevada. We've got a great show for you today. Stories about we're going to follow up on WannaCry and see what the aftermath of that has been. It's very much as we predicted. We did a deep dive last week. If you haven't seen that, I would definitely advise you to go check that out. We also have stories about Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning. The situations with them changed virtually overnight, so this week was a big week for truth tellers. In that regard, we're going to dig into that story and see what that's all about. And also, we may just be able to get to the rest of the Jeff Sessions story that we were not able to get to last week. The Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, really trying to crack down and prosecute crimes in a way that has not been done for a while. So, new things from this administration. Also, we've got a great guest today. Dan Johnson of the Tax Revolution Institute is going to be talking with us. He's got a very nuanced and interesting view on taxes, the voluntary or involuntary nature of them. So we're going to dig in. Really interesting show. Taxes are often not an interesting subject, but his take on it and what he has to say I find intriguing, and so that's the reason why we had him on the show. So to help me out with all of that, as always, my good friend, co-host and producer, Mr. Christian Reyes. Christian.
Thank you, Vin.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. You know, we were going through trying to like change the color around on the cameras because I was like, I look red. Something's wrong with the camera. Then I just saw myself in the mirror, and I was like, "Oh no, dude, you got way too much sun over the weekend." I think I'm like a little bit burned. How was your weekend?
It was awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was great.
Dude, it's like I was expecting it to already be 100 degrees.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's actually reasonable in Las Vegas.
It's nice right now.
Right?
It's great, yeah.
But because it's not 100 degrees yet, that means it's still allergy season in Vegas, which is one of the worst, and I have them. So if you see me start to like do one of these and cough, like so that I don't blow everybody's eardrums out, just be ready on the mute, bro. Be ready on the mute. So look, this week, of course, what's in the media is Donald Trump's trip to Saudi Arabia, his crazy dancing with the Saudis, doing all kind of weird stuff in the $110 billion arms deal, right?
Right. Touching the weird globe.
The globe, that was... Like, that one was weird, man. Like, we are in control of the globe, right? But I don't want to do any of those stories. And the reason why I don't want to do any of those stories is because I'm really coming to the realization that there are two cultures, right? They talk about a clash of civilizations, right? And the clash of civilizations has been of the last 15 years and more, right? That they've said that it's like the Islamic world and sort of the Western world as it is. That's not. I think those two have melded together, and I think Trump's trip proves that. Yeah. Right. It's the same culture. You know, it's the same overall culture. It's these sort of two sides playing against each other, and the various different factions vying for control. I coined a term this week. I've been writing my book, and the term I coined is crypto savages. Right? So, you think about the expansion of civilizations, right? Whether it was the Greeks and the Romans, and when they would go into like the barbarian lands, right? Or the, as the Islamic sort of caliphate extended, and it was the infidels, the non-believers, right? Or if it was coming into the New World and the European powers going and calling the Native Americans savages, right? There's this kind of underlying idea underneath those notions that there's not a culture there. Like that you're encountering people who basically don't have a culture, right? They're savages, they're barbarians. But they have been existing in the places where they're existing for thousands of years. As long as you have with your civilization, right? So really what it is, it's a clash of civilizations. But the reason why do you know why they're called barbarians?
No.
interesting story, and it goes straight to this. They're called barbarians because that's how, I believe that term first started with the Romans. That's what they thought the other people's language sounded like. Bar, 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 bar,
Oh,
bar,
shit.
bar, bar, right? So they called them barbarians.
Interesting.
And it's basically that they couldn't understand them. And what crypto savages are, and crypto not meaning, some people now think it means code because cryptocurrency, but crypt is a Greek root, originally meaning hidden or secret,
Okay.
right? So cryptocurrency is hidden currency.
Ah, interesting.
Cryptography is the art of hidden writing or hidden drawing, right? Which is the codes, hidden writing, secret writing. A crypto savage is basically what we are, and it's the people that we bring on, like people who are agorists, people who are living in this new way, people who are involved in cryptocurrency, because of course a crypto savage would use cryptocurrency
Right.
and other cryptography. There is a culture happening that we are a part of, that we are participating in, that is really hidden. We're living in it. We're operating in it. It's powerful, but it's hidden to the overall culture. To them, we're savages. But it's an established culture. Like we were just saying, just read that BBC headline to you that if you had $100, if you had bought $100 worth of Bitcoin in 2010, $100, it's now worth $73 million.
That's crazy. I put it up on my Facebook too, and a lot of people were saying, "What's Bitcoin? What is that? What is that?"
You're a crypto savage. That's clearly, there's a complete culture there.
Yeah.
If someone can be a millionaire, or there are people out there who are Bitcoin billionaires, there are fully operating markets that you can participate in easier than you can participate in the New York Stock Exchange or the Forex, the foreign exchange market, or the commodities market. Like, there's an entire culture underneath all of that,
And
but it's hidden.
It's still new too. It's
Hidden. And what happens when two civilizations come up against each other? To us, as we look out, and what I've realized that a lot of what it is that we're doing is, I look at Trump, I look at that shit that happened in Saudi Arabia, and I see savages.
Yeah.
I see savages. They're bombing. They want these weapons to destroy shit. I see savages.
Yep.
They're starving their own people. I see savages. But they look at us and they see savages, criminals, terrorists. We're using this other system. And there's more things coming, like the IPFS, the Interplanetary File System, which that's really going to fuck them up, because that's like an unstoppable BitTorrent. That's a decentralized web where no one has control of the files, where the files live in this sort of ether, this sort of fog.
Wow.
Like, so what I'm seeing is the equivalent of their world is now encroaching into our world. And our world encroaching into theirs. And the clash of civilizations is coming. This is the real clash of civilizations. And it's between the old culture and the crypto savages.
Very interesting. I was thinking about this. I don't know quite where this idea is going, but I was thinking about the mind control that's happening and how to break free of that. And I think we're approaching a time where people, that were controlled by television, by media, are learning, and they're going to start breaking free and looking for these alternatives and really moving in this direction.
Well, look at how many people, like young people in their 20s, don't even watch television.
Right.
I mean, television?
Yeah.
It's Netflix and chill, man. It's no television. And, and the offering's getting bigger.
Yeah.
YouTube. Hulu. Yeah. Like, who's really watching television? And that was one of their biggest, strongest mind control tools, was just like this thing on in the background that you couldn't control, that you had to passively intake. And it's not like that anymore. I mean, people are consuming us right now as content. You get to choose. And so it's a foregone and inevitable conclusion. They're going to lose ground, but as they lose ground, there's going to be a pushback,
Right.
right? And we covered WannaCry last week, the ransomware, and I had made some predictions. I made a Vinstradamus tweet saying, "Oh, wouldn't it be convenient when it first came out? Wouldn't it be convenient if this was if this could be tied back to North Korea?"
I saw that and I was like, wow. On your Twitter, I was like, wow.
Right? And then also, we covered it in this whole thing, and I said, look, they're going to try to say that this is to try to denigrate Bitcoin, to try to call it terrorist, to try to lock down these blockchains. So, this week, we see the follow-up. Now, mind you, well, let's go to it. This is our first story. You know, I think important to this story also is that we're going to cover some backlash against Bitcoin. I don't want to say that this was pre-planned necessarily. Having done 6 seasons on a reality TV show and having people say all the time, it's scripted, isn't it? It's scripted. I try to explain to people that, like, it's not about scripting. It's about editing. If you have enough information, if you have enough raw footage, you can pretty much edit any narrative that you want. You don't need to script it. And you might be surprised or you might not be surprised, but the vast majority of reality TV producers cut their teeth in broadcast news. So these are people who know how to create a narrative. They are helped out by the powers that be. I mean, Rahm Emanuel, who was chief of staff for the first Obama administration, his initial chief of staff, and now became mayor of Chicago. He's famous for saying, never let a good crisis go to waste, because you can do things during a crisis that you can't otherwise do. So this WannaCry ransomware represents a crisis. There are some things that they certainly want to do. And so this week, as the ransomware calmed down, let's see what they went into. Here's this aftershock. Ransomware's aftershocks feared as U.S. warns of complexity. This is from the New York Times. Intelligence officials and private security experts say that new digital clues point to North Korean-linked hackers as likely suspects in the sweeping ransomware attacks that have crippled computer systems around the world. Here's this tweet from the New York Times. Christian, bring that. There you go. North Korea. As I said, wouldn't it be convenient? Indicators are far from conclusive. Well, of course they are. The Financial Times, so we've got the North Korea, Financial Times most read letter of the week, titled Ban Cryptocurrencies to Tackle Cyber Attacks. Sir, an effective policy to curtail ransomware, which has caused havoc in the UK's National Health Service and elsewhere, would be to ban the use of Bitcoin and similar cryptocurrencies. Anonymity and fungibility have always made cash the favored tool for illegal activities. Credit cards, checks, and bank transfers are too easily traceable. Bitcoin moves the criminals' favored financial tool online with disastrous consequences. The world now faces a historic choice. Either allow cryptocurrencies to proliferate until it is too late to ban them, or eliminate such tools and enjoy an era in which illegal activity online is circumscribed. Bitcoin was introduced in 2009. It has fulfilled no useful purpose in the financial system. Its only major effect has been to facilitate massive criminal activity, yet, with support from governments, such cryptocurrencies are thriving. The global value of bitcoins in circulation has increased from $3 billion to about $29 billion in the past 2 years. New currencies, such as Ethereum and Ripple, are growing even faster. It is still possible to make all activity in cryptocurrencies an offense. Their worldwide value is $50 billion, only 1.7% of the value of the FTSE 100 stocks in London. Destroying this asset value would create few problems and would strike a blow for justice, as much of it is held by wrongdoers. Christian. It has served no purpose, they say. No useful purpose, and yet Bitcoin is at 2,000, over 2,000, right?
Yes.
2,200. What was it? 2,200 this morning?
Yeah, it was 2,200, up like $900 this month.
So the purpose that it's serving is as a fucking great store of value.
Yeah.
Like that's
Wow.
Purpose? What purpose do you want for your currency if it's not for it to increase in value over time? That's like saying, well, real estate investment, investing in land serves no purpose. What?
It's crazy.
It serves no purpose except criminals. I mean, this part right here. Destroying this asset value would create few problems and would strike a blow for justice as much of it is held by wrongdoers.
Well, now we see the real agenda behind behind the Silk Road case and all that.
Of course.
Yeah. Now we clearly see it, it's...
Well, criminal is one thing. But as we said, the interesting thing about the ransomware is that it takes it to a whole other realm. Because in the past 15 years, we've really fucked up. We let a lot of shit get by us.
Yeah.
I think because there wasn't, it's weird. Like, the more the state pushes, the more the individual pushes back. The more the collective pushes, the more awake they make the individual.
Right.
Like, if they didn't pull off 9/11, they could really have frog in a potted it, like, way more. They probably could have gone and invaded Iraq. They could have gone and done all of these things and had a lot of people who would have otherwise been patriots who didn't wake up. They woke up a lot of people.
It's also a good indicator on how behind they are.
Dude, this is what I'm saying. It's the old culture versus the crypto savages.
Right.
Part of, I think the crypto savage movement really began in many ways with the truth movement.
Yeah.
People taking to the internet, the alternative news movement is part of the crypto savage movement. Because in many ways, these news sources are small. And in many ways, they're hidden. They don't appear on the radar until just like some Indians blending into the foliage who don't appear until boom, they're on top of you and you're getting scalped. There's your Alex Jones.
Yep.
Because they can't even judge it. Their culture is such that, and we saw that with the fake news story, right? The whole fake news thing, they can't even effectively judge what is. I truly believe they can't judge it. They can't judge the difference between an activist post and like a straight up fake news site that really is putting out fake news. They can't judge it because it doesn't fit into their cultural.
Yeah.
Right? It's like it's not a known publication to them. They didn't go to journalism school or to their little liberal arts college with any of the people who work there.
Right. And their culture is, it seems like they're always the effect.
Yeah.
They're always the effect of things. They wait for something to happen. And
They're reactive.
Right,
they're
exactly.
reactive, right?
Yeah.
And but they only react when their culture reacts, right? So they're not reacting to what's big. Like it's one of those things where you would think at this point CNBC should be only talking about cryptocurrency. Only. That should be the only fucking news because it's like Bitcoin is blowing the dollar out. It's blowing the dollar out. But they're not going to cover it good. They can't. Let's go to this thing from Inverse. Congress's Bitcoin terrorism bill takes another step forward. This week, the congressional bill to take a closer look at terrorists' use of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies took another small step toward becoming a law. House Resolution 2433, the Homeland Security Assessment of Terrorist Use of Virtual Currencies Act, would require the DHS to conduct a threat assessment on if, when, how, and why terrorist groups like ISIS are using cryptocurrencies to fund violence at home and abroad. New York Democratic, of course New York, right? where the financial center. New York Democratic Representative Kathleen Rice, the lead sponsor of the bill, briefly pushed the bill through the Homeland Security, Counterterrorism, and Intelligence Subcommittee on Thursday, opening it up to amendments from the full committee in the House of Representatives. Rice cited a recent Center for New American Century report exploring the risks that terrorists could use digital currencies to fund violence anonymously, saying that the threat warranted a formal risk assessment from the DHS. Quote, virtual currencies combine high-speed and low-cost networks with access to users all over the world, Rice said during a subcommittee hearing on Tuesday. Now, sidebar, this is me not reading anymore. Virtual currencies combine high-speed and low-cost networks with access to users all over the world. That's bad. And that's bad. Like, relative to your system, it's faster, cheaper, more accessible. Better, faster, cheaper, pick any two. These are market laws. Whenever you have those three things in confluence, better, meaning accessible to more people, faster, and cheaper, any two of those means that the alternative will win. This is an economic axiom. And what does she say? Virtual currencies combine high speed, faster, low-cost networks, cheaper, with access to users all over the world, better. It's over. And the only way they could stop it is to start throwing people in jail and scaring people. So to continue, let's go back on this article. Yes. The concern, Rice said, was that cryptocurrencies, quote, may be more appealing to lone wolf terrorists. Small-scale terrorists don't require large amounts of funding, as recent attacks around the globe have proven. Buying weapons legally is cheap and accessible in the United States, as is renting or hijacking large trucks like the ones used in multiple attacks in Europe over the past year. Unlike large plots like the 9/11 attacks, which were funded through a shadowy web of government and non-government groups in the Middle East, the concern is that through a simple Bitcoin transaction, ISIS or other terror groups could remotely, quickly, and securely fund homegrown terrorists or lone wolf attackers with a few taps of a smartphone. So there you go, dude. No evidence that this is happening. Zero. Mm-hmm. Zero. And here she's saying, small-scale terrorists don't require large amounts of funding. But the worldwide value of Bitcoin is $50 billion. So clearly, most of the money, the vast majority of the money, if not all of the money, is not being held by terrorists. Now, the other thing is, if you were a terrorist network, right? Perhaps let's take them at their word, right? Let's argue with their argument. Mm-hmm. If I want to send money, if I'm a terrorist organization and I want to send money to someone, first thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to hold money in Bitcoin, because that's sitting on a public ledger.
Right.
I'm going to hold money in cash. Then I'm going to purchase Bitcoin and immediately and actually what I would do is if you're going to, because this is the best way to send money anyway, right? If you've got cash, if I've got cash and I want to send money to you, the best thing for me to do is to buy with cash, by hand, from somebody who's got it, mm-hmm. and have them send it directly to your address. And then you sell it. So like it sits in one address that you had it's totally untrackable, but it doesn't sit on the blockchain.
Right.
Like you're not sitting with that money. You're hopefully standing next to somebody else who's got cash at the very moment that we do it. Right? Or I buy it with cash from this person and have them send it to the guy who's going to give you the cash for it.
Yep.
Like there's no reason for you to even hold it. And so neither one of these two guys know anything about anything. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like you going to the pawn shop and buying gold. And then flying with the gold, and then giving the gold and selling the gold to somebody, and he gives cash to you. Mm-hmm. Like, It's undoable unless you're just going to make it completely illegal. Like, that's what they're really talking about.
Yeah.
They want to stop the crypto savages. But the people that it hurts is not the terrorists. It doesn't hurt the terrorists. They're going to find a way. They're funding with cash right now.
Yep, they're going to do it anyways.
Not only are they funding with cash, they're funding through charities, registered charities. They're funding through fucking bank transfers. They're funding with checks. They're funding with bank deposits. Like, get the fuck out of here, dude. They're mailing a cashier's check.
Well, the Clintons are just doing it with charities. They're stealing
That's
the
what
money.
I'm saying. So, this is a real thing. Conveniently, here's what's interesting. 9 days before WannaCry, May 3rd, this group, think tank, Center for a New American Security, CNAS, publishes this. Put up this CNAS terror. Look at the date, May 3rd. WannaCry was on May 12th. We see what's being pushed through Congress. I'm not saying that it's scripted. But I'm saying it sure is a coincidence. A strong coincidence. Center for a New American Security. Terrorist use of virtual currencies from May 3rd, 9 days before WannaCry. This paper explores the risk that virtual currencies, VCs, may become involved in the financing of terrorism at a significant scale. VCs, that's virtual currencies, and associated technologies hold great promise for low-cost, high-speed, verified transactions that can unite counterparties around the world. For this reason, they could appear appealing to terrorist groups, as they are at present to cyber criminals. Currently, however, there is no more than anecdotal evidence that terrorist groups have used virtual currencies to support themselves. Terrorists in the Gaza Strip have used virtual currencies to fund operations, and Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, ISIS members, and supporters have been particularly receptive to the new technology, with recorded uses in Indonesia and the United States. Most terrorist funding now occurs through traditional methods such as the Hawala system, an often informal and cash-based money transfer mechanism, and established financial channels. If virtual currencies become sufficiently liquid and easily convertible, however, and if terrorist groups in places such as Sub-Saharan Africa, Yemen, and the Horn of Africa obtain the kinds of technical infrastructure needed to support virtual currency activity, then the threat may become more significant. So, Center for a New American Century. This name should really remind for a New American Security, and there's a reason why I got that wrong. CNAS should really remind you of PNAC, Project for a New American Century. You may remember these guys because, similar to how they conveniently released a report saying terrorists may use virtual currencies and we need to crack down on them prophetically, right before this WannaCry ransomware. Well, PNAC, that was, so we just read Center for a New American Security. Well, Project for a New American Century back in 2000 said something that you may recall. They said, written before the September 11 attacks and during political debates of the war in Iraq, a section of Rebuilding America's Defenses by the Project for a New American Century, entitled Creating Tomorrow's Dominant Force, became the subject of considerable controversy. The passage suggested that the transformation of American armed forces through new technologies and operational concepts was likely to be a long one, quote, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor, unquote. Journalist John Pilger pointed to this passage when he argued that the Bush administration had used the events of September 11th as an opportunity to capitalize on long-desired plans. So, Christian, just months before September 11th, you have Project for a New American Century, bunch of neocons, prophetically saying, you know what, we won't be able to transform the military unless we have a new Pearl Harbor. And then, a new Pearl Harbor.
Sure enough. Wow.
Now, you know, time frames of things are getting shorter and shorter as communication increases.
Yeah.
So now we have this group. And who is the Center for a New American Security? Are these just some randoms out there? Let's do this CNAC who is. So, the Center for a New American Security, CNAS, is a Washington, D.C. based think tank established in 2007 by co-founders Michelle Flournoy and Kurt M. Campbell. It specializes in the United States national security issues. CNAS's stated mission is to, quote, develop strong, pragmatic, and principled national security and defense policies that promote and protect American interests and values. CNAS focuses on terrorism and irregular warfare, the future of the U.S. military, the emergence of Asia as a global power center, and the national security implications of natural resource consumption. Former Deputy Secretary of State James Seinberg called CNAS, quote, an indispensable feature on the Washington landscape. Speaking at the CNAS annual conference in June 2009, U.S. Central Command Commander General David Petraeus observed that CNAS has, in a few years, established itself as a true force in think tank and policy-making circles. The administration of President Barack Obama has hired several CNAS employees for key jobs. So, we've got Petraeus speaking there. We have another good friend of ours and good friend of global war and U.S. hegemony speaking there. We've got our good friend Clinton. There you go, Center for a New American Security. She's very happy to be there. Let's take a look at this board of directors here. So, you may recognize some of these names. Richard Armitage, of course. You go down a little further, and you get to board of directors member Joseph Lieberman. So we're talking about the criminality of Bitcoin. We're talking about, is this thing moving forward? We've got this group that says we need to be investigating virtual currencies heavily. Joe Lieberman happens to be on the board of directors. And coincidentally, who's the leading candidate to replace Comey at the FBI? Oh, Joe Lieberman. Coincidence, coincidence. James Murdoch is also on there. On their board of directors, James Clapper, who was just sitting in doing... in the hearings, the former head of the CIA, and our good friend and a star of the Pizzagate scandal, Tony Podesta, is on the board of advisors as well. Madeleine Albright is one of the directors. So this group is, what they write about is what foreshadows the things that are going to be coming up in the future. So Christian, basically that's where we're at. They want to tie it to North Korea. Mm-hmm. I think that's a spurious link. But it's given them enough. It's given them enough to start to move forward with what it is that they really want to do. Honestly, what they have to do.
Yeah.
Because the entire crypto savage culture, especially as these tokens, like as we, Swarm City being an example, as these businesses start to establish themselves, their tax base is about to be removed. This is what Samuel Edward Konkin had written about. This is what agorism is. He was making a description of what's coming. He wasn't making a prescription, contrary to what some people out there who profess to be agorists and may or may not be writing about the subject think. It's not activism. He was describing crypto savagery. He was describing the fact that this will come. It's the natural ebb and flow, and we're seeing it. They're going to try to take these virtual currencies down, but I'm going to tell you something right now. It ain't going to fucking happen. And Bitcoin still rising. Mm-hmm. Even with this news there, if this was a traditional currency, people would be leaving in droves. If there was some thought... If there was some thought that they were going to shut down or shut down some company or remove it from a stock exchange or make it illegal to own stock in some company, that stock would fall like a stone.
Crazy.
Cryptocurrencies, on the rise, every single one of them.
Daily.
Daily. Some other crypto savages, as I said, a lot of this started with the Truth Movement.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And we had Lynn Ulbrich on recently, and I do feel like overall in this situation that Ross Ulbricht is the Nelson Mandela of
Yeah,
this.
absolutely.
But more because the depth of his involvement in these concepts, like him embodying the free market, is more than anyone else, I think. But this week, of course, we had the first thing that occurred was it was expected. We had the expected release from prison of Chelsea Manning, and that is our second story.
Chelsea Manning has been released from prison decades early. Manning was freed from Fort Leavenworth military prison in Kansas Wednesday morning after serving just 7 years of her 35-year sentence. Back in 2013, Manning was convicted of leaking hundreds of thousands of classified government documents to WikiLeaks. Her release date was originally scheduled for 2045. But former President Barack Obama commuted her sentence just days before he left office. Manning will remain an active duty soldier in the U.S. Army. She won't be paid a salary, but she will be eligible for health care benefits.
So the statement from Chelsea Manning on this, after another anxious 4 months of waiting, the day has finally arrived, Manning said in a statement after her release. I'm looking forward to so much. Whatever is ahead of me is far more important than the past. I'm figuring things out right now, which is exciting, awkward, fun, and all new for me. So we definitely have a spokesperson. We're going to see just how far, I mean, look, again, Manning is still active duty military, not taking a salary, but still active duty, eligible for health benefits and all of that. So we'll see what that means in terms of her being able to actually speak out, what she's going to do publicly. I mean, I don't think that the idea was ever with the release of the information to be some public figure, got caught out in dealing with WikiLeaks. So we'll see. There may not be a spokesperson there, but the spokesperson of the truth movement, the sort of quintessential crypto savage, if you will, Julian Assange also had some news. We've got a little video of this, and I'll just narrate this. So go ahead and pop this up. Julian Assange's legal standoff explained. This is from The Guardian. Assange came to prominence in 2010 after his organization WikiLeaks published a huge batch of classified documents. The leaks originated with an American soldier, Chelsea Manning. Nearly 750,000 classified or sensitive military and diplomatic cables were exposed.
Let me know when you have it. Light them all up. Come on, fire!
But there was a twist. Sweden issued an arrest warrant after 2 women accused him of rape and sexual assault. In December 2010, he was detained by British police. After being freed on bail, Assange spent the following 18 months fighting against extradition to Sweden.
Well, it's great to smell fresh air of London again.
In May 2012, the UK Supreme Court upheld the decision to extradite Assange. The following month, Assange entered the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he was unreachable by British police. He has remained there ever since. Assange was concerned he would be sent to the U.S. where he could face charges over the Manning leaks. 2 months later, Ecuador granted Assange asylum over fears his human rights might be violated if he was extradited.
Thank you, President Correa.
Ha sido un gusto conocerlo, Julian.
It's been a pleasure to meet you, Julian, at least in this way. And cheer up. Welcome to the club of the persecuted.
3 years into his stay, Swedish prosecutors dropped 2 of the allegations as they had run out of time to question him. But the most serious accusation, rape, remained. In October 2015, the Metropolitan Police announced they would no longer be permanently stationed outside the embassy. In February 2016, a UN panel ruled that Assange had been arbitrarily detained by UK and Swedish authorities.
How sweet it is.
The UK Foreign Office disagreed, claiming Assange was, in fact, voluntarily avoiding lawful arrest by choosing to remain in the Ecuadorian embassy as a foreign office state. Throughout this time, WikiLeaks continued to publish sensitive
By the number of leaks, and some of them are quite serious. So yes, it is a priority. We've already begun to step up our efforts, and whenever a case can be made, we will seek to put some people in jail.
Despite the announcement, Swedish prosecutors are to drop their investigation into Assange. UK police say the arrest warrant still stands. but his fate remains unclear. So basically, he's sitting with a kind of a bench warrant. Let's go to this Guardian story, and we'll just cover this really quickly. Sweden drops case against Assange. UK keeps him detained anyway. Swedish prosecutors have dropped their preliminary investigation into an allegation of rape against the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, bringing an end to a 7-year legal standoff. The decision was taken after prosecutors concluded that, quote, at this point, all possibilities to conduct the investigation are exhausted, unquote. Sweden's Director of Public Prosecutions, Marianne Nye, said on Friday. Separate allegations of sexual assault made by a second Swedish woman were dropped by Swedish authorities in 2015 after the statute of limitations expired. So Assange gave a statement in case you were wondering whether he was going to now dip out of the scene. This is the Will Not Forgive.
What are you going to do now? Today is an important victory for me and for the UN human rights system. But it by no means erases 7 years of detention without charge, in prison, under house arrest, and almost 5 years here in this embassy without sunlight. 7 years without charge, why my children grew up without me. That is not something that I can forgive. It is not something that I can forget. The inevitable inquiry into what has occurred in this moment of terrible injustice is something that I hope will be more than just about me and this situation, because the reality is detention and extradition without charge has become a feature of the European Union.
So, Christian, we have an interesting situation here. Of course, Manning is out. That was a well-known WikiLeaks dump. Snowden, you had the dump with Snowden, but that was also coordinated with British media as well as with the Intercept. Then the Clinton emails, right? And the question has been, with the Clinton emails, of course, was it Russia, right? That was, we covered that in depth on the show.
Yep.
Showed why it's very unlikely that it was Russia, that it's very unlikely that it was hacking, that it was more likely that it was leaking. Assange has said it's leaking. A lot of questions had been raised about the death of the curious death of Seth Rich, a DNC staffer who was killed while walking home, something like 4 a.m, who was shot in D.C., died, his possessions not taken, so not a robbery. Very suspicious, and many people said, was Seth Rich the leaker? No one said directly. There were some intimations from Assange that the leaker, in this case, may have been killed. So now we have a special investigator assigned, Mueller, the former FBI director, assigned to look into these Russia allegations. Was there Russian involvement with the Trump campaign? And out of the blue comes Kim.com, famous hacker, entrepreneur, and crypto savage. Big time crypto savage, right?
Yeah.
He's the founder of Mega Upload, right? Comes out with a tweet storm. Him and Hannity going back, Sean Hannity going back and forth. That's could turn out to be something very interesting tomorrow. Let's look at this Kim.com. This is something I'm sure we're going to be covering next week. Kim.com, the first tweet here. I'm meeting with my legal team on... Oh, wait, no, go back. Go to the beginning of this thing. Go to number 1. Okay. If Congress includes Seth Rich case into their Russia probe, I'll give written testimony with evidence that Seth Rich was the WikiLeaks source. Go to the next one. So Sean Hannity replies to him, you have that evidence? And Kim.com says, I'm the evidence. Next one. Hannity says, you are the evidence? Can you explain that in more detail? Kim says, I knew Seth Rich. I know he was the WikiLeaks source. I was involved. Next. I'm meeting with my legal team on Monday. I will issue a statement about Seth Rich on Tuesday. Please be patient. This needs to be done properly. Christian, there is an email from John Podesta that was leaked that says, I am all for making an example of this leaker, even if there is no evidence.
Right.
It's big, man.
It's big.
It's big. This is huge.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
This is the culture of the crypto savage, like really impeding on the old culture right now.
Yep.
We need to really get ready for what this, like, this is a bomb, man. This is serious. You know, and the dumbass media, because again, we are savages to them. They can't see what this really means. Mm-hmm. They don't see what's really happening inside our culture. The culture of Reddit and 4chan. Mm-hmm. The culture of live streaming shows and alternative media. They don't see it.
No.
They can't. They can't understand it. It's off their radar. So what are they going for? Delusional lawmakers seek an impeachment over the ghost of Russia. They're still going to roll with this fucking Russia story, man. Here you go. Dude, from Slate. Articles of impeachment for Donald J. Trump. A first draft of an impeachment bill for the president. This is from, we got the date on here? May 16th. They're talking about impeachment. The framers of our Constitution likely never imagined a president like Donald J. Trump, and yet they insert impeachment provisions into the original text of the Constitution some 230 years ago to empower Congress to act in case a rube, tyrant, or criminal came to occupy the nation's highest office. It's not crystal clear which Trump might be, but the president's latest outrageous actions, the reported passing of highly classified intelligence to Russian diplomats in the Oval Office, should awake Republicans and Democrats in Congress to the dangers posed by Trump to the nation, in case that wasn't already obvious. His conduct now goes far beyond mere offense or incitement to constitute actual damage to U.S. national security. The very definition of high crimes and misdemeanors contemplated by the men who crafted the Constitution's impeachment clauses. It goes further than that, man. The New York Times, I was shocked when I saw this. May 17th. New York Times, there is no impeachment on the table. This is like a fantasy world. Mm-hmm. And they put up how the impeachment process works, where they actually run through, okay, here's how the impeachment process works, and they've got a picture of Donald Trump. There's been no investigation. There's been no investigation. This
Crazy.
It's I don't know what they're trying to manifest, something that is just like, it's just not reality.
Yeah, it's
like
just a fantasy.
That's fake news.
Mm-hmm.
That's really fake news. Like, at least Alex Jones has, like, you know, at least the flat earthers can present some evidence. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
At least Alex Jones is like, can make a convincing case, but it's like, dude, no, there's no impeachment on the table. Like, there's none. Mm-hmm. You want there to be. But they've wanted there to be since before he even took office. They were talking about impeachment when he was still the president-elect.
Yeah.
They want it so badly, but here's the thing. It's hubris. Mm-hmm. They want it so badly, they're going to push for this investigation. But what's going to happen in this investigation is Clinton is about to be destroyed. Like, there is at least going to be a thought that Seth Rich was murdered and is the leaker. Like, Kim.com doing this is, at the very least, he's poisoning the well. He's giving enough to the conspiracy theorists that they are going to run with this.
What a mess. Jesus.
Dude, it's curtains for them.
Yeah, it's toast.
Their old culture is just, it's on its last legs. And the thing is, they will eventually realize that, like, oh, this whole thing has been these damn savages. It's these savages. And that's when the fight starts. They haven't, right now they're not in the then they fight you stage. They're getting close. They see. Now it's kind of like, because they say first they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they fight you, then you win. They're kind of in the ridicule stage. They're like, yeah, Bitcoin is for terrorists and Bitcoin is for criminals. It's not. It has no real value. It has no real. It's like, say that to the Bitcoin billionaires out there, and there are Bitcoin billionaires.
And the game changers like Swarm City.
Oh, dude, when the automated cars start running on cryptocurrency and they can't track none of that shit, and they see their taxes start to drop off because people are like, wait a minute. If you pay me in cryptocurrency, I don't have to pay any taxes? And I could just go to an ATM and pull out cash the same way that I can pull it out of my bank? Oh, I'm in. Forget about it. Not to mention the cryptocurrency-backed debit cards that they have now.
And the technologies that's behind that. Blockchain and chain technologies and stuff.
We're in the infancy.
Yeah.
The next six to 12 months, dude.
It's going to get crazy.
And every moment that Bitcoin goes up in value, it's the dollar going down. It's the dollar going down. That's the other thing you have to realize and think about. And all of these other crypto markets are pegged to Bitcoin. Like, it's really, really crazy, man. Like, they can't see it. They don't even understand it. It's not even on their radar, and it's already destroying the foundations of their entire system. Because the crypto savages are running around, man. They're running around in the background. And they can't stop it. They can't even report on it. They don't even have enough knowledge to report on it. We saw that with the ransomware.
They should watch the show.
No, maybe they shouldn't. I think the show is for us. You know what I mean? The show is for us. Why give them any information? But, we are going to see. It's interesting that how they're going to have to clap back, basically, is that it's going to have to be draconian sentences for stupid shit. And Obama had, now remember, this is going to be federal. Like, when you're talking money stuff, it's going to be federal, right? There are already a lot of businesses out there. Like, we've got Bitcoin ATMs all over Vegas. Right. You can go to coinatmradar.com. You could find them in your area. They're everywhere. 99.9% of those companies, not registered money transfer companies. You could throw up a big. I know people personally who have Bitcoin ATMs in this town. They are not registered money transfers. You put up the machine, you attach it to your address, you put some cash in it, you fund your address with some Bitcoins, and you're good to go, dude.
So what's the fight against that? Like, how can they actually stop it? They can't, right?
They're gonna have to go and put it like this. So, like, let's take a Bitcoin ATM as an example. Look, I don't want to tell them how, but I'm assuming that they're not listening right now, and it's not like this is some mystery, right?
Right.
Take a Bitcoin ATM as an example. All the ATMs that are out there, they're, for the most part, they're paying a fee to, like, rent space in a bar, a smoke shop, a gas station, a liquor store, a small grocery store, something like that. A tattoo parlor, something like that. They pay, whatever, $200 a month to let them put their thing there, have access to the Wi-Fi, plug into the power, etc.
Yeah.
They let it ride, just like any ATM, right? You put an ATM, you get a fee. So, or maybe they're paying them a percentage in Bitcoin of whatever they sell.
Right.
So what you do is you go in and you start shaking down the owners of these properties. Okay, who is the person who put the Bitcoin ATM in here? What is their name? What is their contact? How much have they paid you? And if this person doesn't comply, you strip them of their business license. You strip them of their business license. You give them civil and criminal penalties for aiding and abetting illegal money transfer. You threaten to put them. You say, okay, well, you're not going to tell us who it is? Well, it's in your shop, so you're responsible. So we're going to put you on trial. And we're going to make it a RICO. We're going to say that it's organized crime. And the guy to do that, we didn't cover him last week, but it's something people need to pay attention to. The prime guy to do that is the Attorney General we've got right now, Jeff Sessions. This is news number 3. So we didn't cover this last week, but it's important. If you want to let Dan know, Christian, that will be maybe tell him 5 minutes. I don't think this will take very long, but I did want to cover this. Jeff Sessions is the Attorney General. He is very conservative, and the Obama administration had sort of eased what prosecutors would do in terms of pursuing the most draconian mandatory minimums, all of that. Sessions last week ordered tougher sentences for nonviolent drug violations, federal drug violations, but he released a memo that really does not just tie it to drugs, and I think it's very important to this story, so I do want to cover it. This is the tougher story here. This is from the New York Times. Attorney General Jeff Sessions orders tougher sentences for orders tough sentences rolling back Obama policy. Attorney Jeff Sessions has ordered federal prosecutors to pursue the toughest possible charges and sentences against crime suspects. He announced Friday in this memo, if you want to throw this memo up, Christian, reversing Obama administration efforts to ease penalties for some nonviolent drug violations. The drastic shift in criminal justice policy, foreshadowed during recent weeks, is Mr. Sessions' first stamp on the Justice Department, and it highlights several of his top targets: drug dealing, gun crime, and gang violence. And in this memo, he says, first, it is a core principle that prosecutors should charge and pursue the most serious, readily provable offense. This policy affirms our responsibility to enforce the law, is moral and just, and produces consistency. This policy fully utilizes the tools Congress has given us. By definition, the most serious offenses are those that carry the most substantial guideline sentence, including mandatory minimum sentences. So we've got certainly a response to this. Thankfully, Rand Paul issued an immediate response. Mandatory minimum sentences have unfairly and disproportionately incarcerated too many minorities for too long, said Dr. Paul. Attorney General Sessions' new policy will accentuate that injustice. Instead, we should treat our nation's drug epidemic as a health crisis and less as a lock 'em up and throw away the key problem. So, Christian, I do not like in this case that Rand Paul is resorting to the old collectivist argument of protecting minorities. Like, I don't give a fuck what the color of the skin of the person is. Like, justice is not about color of skin.
Yep.
Justice is about due process and equality under the law. Mm-hmm. I'm just as upset if a cisgendered white male is put away on a mandatory minimum as I am a young black transgendered female. You know what I mean? Like, this shit doesn't matter.
No.
It doesn't matter. If anything, these are the individual rights that, like, you're only hurting your cause by doing it as minorities or whatever. But thankfully, a bill was introduced. He went beyond just talking. Bill got introduced. This is the Safety Valve Act. So, senators introduced a bill that allows judges to ignore mandatory minimums for nonviolent drug offenders. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont, and Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon reintroduced the Justice Safety Valve Act S1127 in the U.S. Senate. Representative Bobby Scott, a Democrat from Virginia, and Representative Thomas Massey, Republican from Kentucky, are reintroducing companion legislation in the U.S. House of Representatives. Last week, Attorney General Jeff Sessions directed federal prosecutors to pursue the most serious charges and maximum sentences in their cases, returning to stricter enforcement of mandatory minimum sentences. The Justice Safety Valve Act would give federal judges the ability to impose sentences below mandatory minimums in appropriate cases based on mitigating factors. Quote, mandatory minimum sentences disproportionately affect minorities and low-income communities while doing little to keep us safe and turning mistakes into tragedies. As this legislation demonstrates, Congress can come together in a bipartisan fashion to change these laws, said Senator Paul. So, you know, as an anarchist, it is important for me to recognize the illegitimacy of the state. However, there are state actions that are preferable to others. We can't forget that. And on that note, I think that is a great segue to get into what I know is about to be a very interesting discussion on tax policies, perhaps some options beyond just saying taxation is theft, some moves that we could possibly make as crypto savages in the near future to make some changes to tax code, or at least to educate people enough so that we can start to have a conversation that leads us to more liberty. So we're going to have that conversation with our guest, Dan Johnson. We will do that after the break. So. Welcome back to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani. We are also streaming on Twitter and Periscope. At Vin Armani is my handle there. And we are streaming live on the Facebook page of our content partner, Activist Post. That's facebook.com/Activist Post. Christian, why don't you go ahead and bring Dan on? And while you are doing that, I would like to tell these people about counter markets. So, counter markets, we are in our May issue. If you haven't signed up and haven't gotten your first issue for free yet, you can go and do that at countermarkets.com. Trends and strategies for maximum freedom. Particularly poignant to our conversation today is a wonderful article talking about which professions and which occupations are going to survive the coming automation job apocalypse. I think it's a very important thing for us to start thinking about. I was at the AT&T store yesterday, actually, just briefly, and out in front there were tons of people striking and saying, "Don't go in, don't go in." And I was actually going in to pay a bill in cash to their little payment kiosk. So I told them, "Listen, I'm going in. I'm about to interact with only a robot in there, and you're out here striking. So you might want to be careful about striking, and you might want to think a little differently when there's robots that can do a job." And it was funny watching the wind get taken sort of out of their sails as I walked in, but it's something that we have to consider. We've got automated cars coming along, automated transportation. Google and Uber are actually locked now in a lawsuit that we will be covering for sure that deals with automated semi-trucks. The company Otto that Uber owns, OTTO, that's something like 15 million people in the United States are somehow tied to the transportation industry. Like, what does that mean? What does that mean when 15 million jobs are toast, never to return? So these are the types of things that we talk about. Of course, we've also got other great articles and our cryptocurrency reports, which have been spot on. So if you had been following those, even in the last 3 months, you could have made yourself quite a bit of money. So I would advise go check out countermarkets.com. Get this month's newsletter. It's totally free to you, no strings attached. We know that you're going to love it so much that you're going to go ahead and get a subscription. So please do that. It's on me. And yeah, let's go ahead now to our guest for this week, Dan Johnson. Dan Johnson is the executive director of the Tax Revolution Institute, Prior to joining the Tax Revolution Institute, he was the founder of People Against the NDAA, PANDA, which he grew into one of the largest civil liberties movements in America, and served as president of the Solutions Institute, an activist training center. He has written for over a dozen news outlets, including the Huffington Post, frequently speaks at major events around the country, and has appeared on numerous radio and TV shows. As TRI's executive director, he has presided over the Tax Revolution Institute's First Amendment Alliance to protect nonprofit free speech, spearheaded the launch of an Audit the IRS initiative, and is currently lighting the brushfires of a tax revolution. Dan Johnson, welcome to the Vin Armani Show.
Thanks so much for having me on.
It's great to have you on. You know, we are anarchists, I guess you could say, voluntarists. So we're very much about the idea that taxation is theft. But when I listen to the arguments that you were making for a reform, and I think more than a reform, a rethinking of what the tax system was supposed to be, what it has become, and perhaps what we could turn it into, I was very intrigued and wanted to have you on the show. So you're obviously a young guy, and already you've been involved in a lot. Can you tell us about before we get into the tax discussion, about your personal path? How did you start getting involved in sort of the liberty scene, and what was that moment that changed it for you?
So I was a neocon growing up, and my idea of anything that was wrong with the country was Obama, and he's going to take our guns. And I did want to get, though, involved in politics, because I found, as I was looking at different entrepreneurial endeavors and different careers, I found that if you wanted to actually change the world, you had to get involved in politics or get it out of your way. And I took political science at Bowling Green State University, and while I was there, my whole plan was, okay, I'm going to take this political science class, I'm going to go to the state house and intern there, I'm going to run for city council, county commission, kind of work my way up the political ladder, and eventually get elected to Congress, take a few bribes, retire on a private island. And unfortunately, this whole plan was completely destroyed when I came across a video on the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act. Now, for your listeners who may not be familiar with that, the NDAA allowed the president essentially to detain without a charge or trial any person simply because they were suspected of being involved in terrorism. Very similar legislation to what America used to detain 110,000 Japanese Americans in 1942. And I decided this was something worth fighting. This was something worth doing something about. Did my research, and eventually got involved at that level with People Against the NDAA. We passed legislation from coast to coast, actually, preventing the federal government from utilizing the powers of the NDAA in cities from Albany, New York, the capital of New York, all the way out to Oregon. And I noticed that this was a broader fight for liberty at that point, that there were so many issues that if you took back some local control, if you took back some local power, that liberty would start winning. And I founded the Solutions Institute, an activist training center. And then when I was at Solutions Institute, I was approached by some victims of the IRS, and they said, would you guys like to take on repealing the tax code? And I thought, well, as far as impossible jobs go, sure, sign me up. So that's how we started the Tax Revolution Institute. And really the principle of the Tax Revolution, the Tax Revolution Institute, we spent a decent amount of time, looking at the tax code and looking at the tax system and trying to figure out, okay, what would be a reform that would simultaneously bring us more liberty and just be better all around for people. And what we found, quite frankly, was that the tax system doesn't work for people primarily because it's coercive. And this is the point that all voluntarists and libertarians are making when they talk about taxation as theft. They're referring to it's coercive. You don't have a say in where your money goes. You don't have a say in when they take your money. You literally don't have a say in any of this. And because you don't, it leads to all kinds of major problems with all the things we set taxes forward to do. And so our tax system ends up being broken. And our position as Tax Revolution Institute is there are so many organizations, there are so many companies, there are so many individuals who serve what we'll call the public good or public welfare. And libertarians talk a lot about how bad government is. But they really never talk about how great the solutions in the private market are. And not only are we looking to change that, but we're looking to change how much of the tax money, or how much money actually goes to these solutions by actually changing or revolutionizing the tax system, and that is the tax revolution.
So let's start at the beginning then of the journey of the Tax Revolution Institute. Let's talk about these victims of the IRS, as you say, because some people are like, "What? I don't understand. What is that? Victims of the IRS?" So tell us what are the sorts of things that were happening with these people that were causing them to reach out and look for help from somewhere.
So basically, they're running organizations, they're running nonprofit organizations, and they're doing things like health research and things like that. And the IRS decides that they're going to sue them in court. They're going to go after them in the specific words of an IRS agent, because you have money. That's why we're going after you. And these people had, I don't want to reveal necessarily who they are, but these people had been in fights with various government agencies before and found that when you strike back, it tends to work out better in your favor than just bowing down and taking it. So that was really their big impetus for forming the Tax Revolution Institute. And it was the tax code and the complication of the tax code that gave the IRS at least some legitimacy in even bringing that case to court in the first place. So they wanted to not just focus on doing something about the IRS, which we did a significant amount last year, but also tackling the tax code, tackling the tax system, the complication of it, et cetera.
Okay, so this is, when you say something like you're going to be much better off striking back than taking it, it stands to reason that you actually have the moral high ground than it would seem. Like, I know that the IRS is a bully, and I know that a lot of what is actually being done on behalf of the IRS it's technically illegal, what they're doing. Let's talk about what the IRS or what the tax code is supposed to be, because I think that's a very interesting part about your argument. What is the legal framework? What is the moral basis? What is supposed to be going on? And then if you could tell us how that is not taking place, and I think that's a good starting point so that people actually understand.
Sure. So if you look at the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, it lists out these are the things that the government is supposed to be doing, and these are the things that the tax system, therefore, should fund. But in the United States, we have a much broader understanding of what taxes actually is, and I can illustrate this with an example. As someone who generally, as you guys are someone who generally says that taxation is theft, usually the response from someone who's more liberal or who leans in that direction will be what?
Will be, well, you want people to die in the streets, and you want, who will build the roads, basically.
Exactly, right? Who will build the roads? You hate the poor, right. All of these wonderful things, right? But of course, the tax system is voluntary, so you must not hate the poor because you give.
Well,
so much
talk about this. Let's talk about this voluntary, because that is a very core and important part. I clearly don't see it as voluntary, but when I have these conversations with people, they say, well, no, I'm voluntarily giving, so then that means it's certainly voluntary for me. Now, of course, the question arises, like, if there was absolutely no consequence for you not paying, would you still pay? And I think that's a totally different scenario. But talk to us about, are the taxes in the United States supposed to be voluntary?
And this is getting to with the definition of the tax system that libertarians really need to understand. Because if you did a poll today and you asked every American, so if we got rid of taxes, would you be okay with that? I guarantee you the poll would come back with like 97-3, and the 3 would be libertarians and anarcho-capitalists. Right. And the reason why is people view the tax system for the services that it provides. And they view the tax system as kind of, this is the check I write out every single year to take care of everything that I don't want to deal with.
The social
That's what they
contract,
viewed it-
right?
The social contract, the collective helping people more than I as the individual can. I'm pooling my money with other people to do good. Like, this is the justification for the tax system is almost never. It is a great idea for the IRS to be able to send you threatening letters and take from your bank account. The argument for the tax system, the argument for what I would say is at the core of government. The argument for the tax system is the services that the tax system provides are the only place we're going to get those services. Therefore, I'm doing my part. I'm doing the social good. And in a way, that's why they view it as voluntary, because they genuinely feel like, yeah, they're calculating it for me, or like they're figuring out how much money I should give. But I genuinely feel good giving at least some of this money, because I think at least some of it is going to help people. Some of it is going for people's needs.
It's my fair share, right? That's the whole. The IRS is just telling me what the number is. That's my fair share. That's the argument, I guess.
Exactly. And libertarians completely fail to meet this big argument head on and actually give their opponents way too much leverage. Because by arguing, oh, no, government is bad and I just don't want them, arguing only on the taking of taxes side, you're arguing, okay, I don't want taxes taken from me. You seem like, oh, you're just a freeloader or something like that. By arguing instead, as we're doing, and we're actually shifting, you might have seen the website shift over the past day, we're actually shifting from an idea kind of think tank, putting it out there to the market and seeing what they're interested in, to we actually have specific action plans we're going to be asking people to take on now. And in that shift is going, instead of arguing that the government shouldn't be taking so much taxes, or like Steve Forbes told me once, who's one of the icons of the tax movement, has done a lot for it. He said, I asked him, well, how do you humanize taxes? I asked him this at a Students for Liberty conference this year. And he's like, you tell people, oh, they're being taxed on their air. You know, every time they turn on the faucet, they're being taxed. And it misses this fundamental point, which is the support for the tax system is about the services they believe it provides. It is not about the taxes.
Right.
So if instead you take the position, actually, no. It's not that it's not that we're against those services, much to the contrary. Give you an example. The Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, or what we call straight welfare.
Right.
For every $10 that goes into that program. Now, you know, overhead at a for-profit might be 10 or 20%.
Sure.
Overhead at a nonprofit, probably up to 30 or 40%. Okay, you might have a little overhead. You got to pay people to do their jobs, and even if it's just like signing and sending out a welfare check, but whatever. So the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, straight cash to cash, every $10 that goes in that program, only $2.60 ends up in the hands of a welfare recipient.
So 70-something% overhead is what we're talking about.
74% overhead. And when I say, no, there's just about no one on the planet who's that inefficient, even if I paid a guy, straight paid a guy 30% to hand out money to
hand it out, yeah.
It would still be twice the system. It would help out twice the amount of people. And when I make that argument, guess what I force them to do? Either now they have to go, oh no, this system's kind of better, or they have to defend the only thing left in the tax system that makes it different, which is the coercion. And good luck defending that, because people really don't like being forced to do things.
So what about the argument that, well, and I guess then that you're right, it does get into the coercion, because then it's like, if I say, well, I'd be happy to help out, but I'm only going to help out if it can be 30% overhead. Like, I don't want to waste my money, right? I think it's a very, very brilliant argument. Can you give us some other examples that, because I think it really does illustrate a great argument that we need to start having as libertarians.
Absolutely. So another great example, in fact, something that's trotted out by a few libertarians here and there, is the Detroit Threat Management Center. I'm not sure how familiar you are or aren't with them. But the statistics on the Detroit Threat Management Center are, we know we have a police shooting epidemic in this country versus every other country, even countries with a lot of guns. I mean, Germany, for example, they kill 1 to 3 people or so a year. Their police do. Iceland, 1 to 3 people a decade. And the United States kills 1,100 people a year. So, or U.S. police forces do. So, okay, so we have this police shooting epidemic, but people go, well, how are you ever going to crack down on crime if we don't just kill them all? And the Detroit Threat Management Center takes a different approach. They take the approach, in fact, as a for-profit company, they take the approach that it's actually more profitable, because it is, to prevent crime from happening than it is to address it after the fact. And so they don't train their officers with this bully, macho, I'm going to take you to jail for jaywalking mentality. In fact, they avoid that entirely. They don't even allow their officers to be prior military, so there's no chance of that battlefield mentality coming in. Not only are they not taxed on their profits, so you actually have kind of this example of a free society operating, but they also perform most of the work that government already does. So, for example, you have the Child Protective Services. Child Protective Services strikes a knife of fear into the heart of most parents because they're like, oh, well, they can take my kid.
Yeah.
No proof, no warrant, no, just take them, gone. They've decided I'm a bad parent, it's over. They also they do some counseling and they do family stuff and they do a lot of other things. But Florida CPS was just like, screw that. We like the enforcement part, beating people's doors down. We're going to contract the rest of the happy feel-good stuff out to a nonprofit called Children's Home Society that already does a better job. So we'll let them do it. And you also, one of my favorite examples actually is Kiva. Not sure how familiar you are
the
with
micro loans, right? Maybe if you could explain that to people who don't know.
Right. So banks typically set their interest rates on their loans based on risk. So they want you to pay them back. They're offering you money, but it's not like I'm handing you this money. I want you to pay me back. And that thus low-income people who were in a lot of poverty, who actually probably need the loans the most, were the riskiest to loan to, and most banks wouldn't even try. And so the Grameen Bank in India actually came up with this concept of microfinance, which is they would deliver a small loan to these people, and they would tie five low-income people would have to sign the loan together. And so they would tie kind of their fortunes together and make sure these people kept each other accountable on the loan. And that was so popular and took so many people out of poverty in India that even though it doesn't mean anything anymore, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his work. And Kiva is kind of an American example of that. They've loaned out $950-something million, 97% repayment rate.
Wow.
Microfinance, or here's a little bit of money to get you out of where you're at, rather than here's a paycheck that not only, as some libertarians might say, you don't have to work anymore, but a paycheck that, let's say you get a $2,000 paycheck from the welfare department. Now, if you get a job that pays you $2,000, are you likely to want to go get that job? You could lose that job like this, but welfare is guaranteed. Right. Why would you do that? It makes no sense. So it takes people out of the welfare cliff and the welfare trap. And these are just a few examples. Another one I like to throw out, actually, is Christian healthcare ministries. So we have this big healthcare debate going on right now. And there's a little section in the Obamacare law that was fought really hard for by these healthcare co-ops, which allows, if you are a religious-based ministry, you're like the only other thing that can operate in the healthcare industry now. And the Christian healthcare ministries has been around since 1981. They have 279,000 members. They've covered over $1 billion in medical bills. And all it costs to join and get your medical bills covered, essentially, is half of what it costs on the Obamacare marketplace. These are examples all across the spectrum. I mean, I'm just throwing out 4 or 5, but it's these type of examples that if libertarians ever want to win the argument on taxes, these are the examples they need to be trotting out.
So we're talking about the services provided. So clearly this is the place where libertarians can take a moral high ground and say, no, I absolutely do not want to see people dying in the streets. I absolutely do not want to see the people who cannot afford health care dying of cancer. I absolutely want to see the streets protected. I absolutely want to see all of these things. So now let's make the tie-in between how do we get from then this vast amount of money being involuntarily taken away, and then they can use it as sort of inefficiently as they want to use it. How do we move from that to a situation where either as individuals or as groups or whatever it is, we can make the decision to move our money into this other sector that's clearly proving to be more efficient because, again, better, faster, cheaper. Like, it's a better alternative if the coercion's away. How do we get this voluntary choice to occur?
Right. So it's a really good question, and it actually kind of brings me back to when we first started the Tax Revolution Institute. There was a lot of pressure on us as a new national tax organization to adopt one of the fancy tax plans out there: the fair tax, the flat tax, the X tax, the business tax. There's all these various taxes out there, and we were looking at the plans and going, all right, why has no one implemented the flat tax? Why has no one implemented the fair tax? There have been millions and millions of dollars, and some of the biggest organizations on earth, even presidential candidates, have endorsed these plans. Sure. Why haven't they gone anywhere? And one of the big reasons they haven't gone anywhere and haven't gotten the endorsement of the American people is you're talking about someone's wallet. And not only are you talking about someone's wallet, but you're talking about theory. See, the flat tax doesn't exist in the United States. So I, as the American consumer, have no idea what that does to my wallet. I mean, we've seen what a small shock will do to the stock market, right? Sure. We've seen, like, what was it, when Yahoo, the Twitter account, got taken over by hackers. And they tweeted out that the president had been shot. Like, the stock market dropped like 400 points. Right. And even though the president was still very much alive. So we know what a small shock can do to the stock market. Imagine changing the entire system of taxation. Quite frankly, you will not win by getting people to go from where they are now to a theory about how it should be. You have to actually provide concrete proof, or you're not going anywhere. And this is where it comes down to the action step. See, there was a really interesting thing introduced in Arizona in 1997 called a charitable tax credit. Now, before I go on, just so your listeners are paying attention, a deduction is what we have now, charitable tax deduction, where the government is literally recognizing, oh yeah, these organizations over here do at least as good a job as us, which is why you can take some off your taxes by giving to them. But that's the deduction. It's 25 cents off every dollar. It's not really a choice. You kind of you get a little kickback. You know, congratulations for doing this to charity, right? A credit is dollar for dollar. For every dollar I give, let's say, to this nonprofit organization, I get $1 off my taxes. It's legitimately redirecting your tax dollars. And in 1997, Arizona implemented the first charitable tax credit. And essentially what it allowed Arizonans to do is redirect up to $200 on their tax form to any nonprofit organization that that spent over 50% of its income with low-income people in the state of Arizona. Since that point, last year, in 2015, so the last taxable year we have data on, 116,000 Arizona taxpayers sent $38 million away from the state and to these nonprofits and to these organizations that are taking care of their communities. You can see the effect that this has on the state of Arizona you have all these little communities that are holding like tax credit days, because that's the way they bring dollars back into the community, is into those organizations. You have mayors endorsing this. You have major groups going out and saying, no, the nonprofit is the community. Usually when a local mayor says, oh, we need more dollars for our community, he's talking about taking more from you in taxes. Right. But what he's saying here is, no, give to the charities in our community. They're doing a great job. That credit was so successful, it was double last year, from $200 to $400. And it's so successful because there's several different reasons, but one of them is the right wants lower taxes, and is going to have to prove that these organizations out here do a better job. And this allows that kind of direct proof. And the left wants more services. They don't really care how the services are provided. They just want better services for people. So if you're able to say, so not only am I moving services out of the government and to these voluntary organizations, and I'm not doing anything with your taxes right away, but I'm moving services over and moving money, allowing taxpayers to move money to these organizations, now there's direct competition between the government and these organizations. And you go, so who helps people better? And primarily it will be those organizations, because they have to earn people's money, because they're not guaranteed a paycheck like the government is. That's a huge paradigm shift in the lower, higher taxes that we always fight over and no one gets anywhere. It's a huge paradigm shift to, no, these guys provide better services, so why do you need the government agencies? And it provides the proof.
I think it's an interesting argument. It's an interesting way of presenting it. The other thing that immediately pops out to me is you basically you institute competition in a market that has previously had a monopoly. So not only are you getting more immediately, but as it continues on and as there is now money flowing in, you're going to get people competing to provide better services at a cheaper price. And we know all you got to do is look at the iPhone to see it doesn't take a whole lot of competition to create a whole lot more efficiency for a much lower price. What I want to ask you about, because I think, what jumps off to me in this situation is, there's a segment of libertarians certainly who say, well, this is great, Dan. Like, it certainly is preferable. I would rather give my money to the private sector, but I would like to decide how much of that money is going. And honestly, if I want it to be zero, because at the same time, so what happens if I don't give that amount to charity this year? Still the IRS is going to come down, and now it's kind of like they're working on behalf of the charities. Do we get into a situation that's kind of like the insurance companies now? You know what I mean? Does this not bring the charities basically into a collusion with the government? How do we prevent that from happening?
So first of all, it's the exact opposite of bringing the charities in collusion with the government when they're competing directly with that government for money. When you bring a charity into collusion with the government is when the government officials are literally just handing them money. Like the politicians are deciding, okay, we're going to give a $2 billion bailout to the charities or the banks or whoever, right? In real competition, those organizations that don't provide the best services, they die. They go away. They're redundant, essentially. And this is actually what's starting to happen in Arizona, that the education tax credits are actually moving so much money out of the public school system that the public school system is having to change the way they're doing business or basically face being defunded. I mean, this is the type of moving of money, so to speak, that is in direct opposition to collusion. It's actually kind of pitting them, so to speak, against the government for those funds. And as we know with real competition, if you have a competitive market, those who don't provide the best services, they die. And to those libertarians who go, okay, who take the lower taxes argument, lower taxes right down to zero. The only way, and this is looking at historical cycles with countries. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Benjamin Disraeli.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
he was
British.
I think it was British or Israeli prime minister.
Right.
I want to say it was British prime minister, but he invented this cycle of the body politic, in which he charted the rise and fall of countries, and found 200 to 250 years is about how long it takes for a country to rise and fall. And what happens when it falls is usually communism or fascism. Those are one of two things. And the reason is you imagine this snowball, right? So government starts providing services for people. People start attaching to the services and needing those services, and they won't bite the hand that feeds them. So government provides more services. Right. So people attach onto those services. So this snowball keeps going and keeps going. And in history, it's never been stoppable. Like, it's completely been an unstoppable snowball that no civilization has ever been able to endure. Well, if you actually are able to move people out of that snowball and into these other organizations, and we use nonprofits just because they're already kind of highly regulated, so there's not going to be really a push for more regulation in the sector to make sure the money goes to the poor people, right? It's already done, so there's no increase in regulation there. But if you move people off of that snowball, you actually have a chance to redirect the country away from communism or fascism. It's like if you ask a company to provide $50 million in projects, and then you say, well, I no longer want to give that company money. If you are going to actually be able to pull your money out of a company, especially that forces you, they're going to have to be doing less projects. Right. And that's the core of the tax revolution here. And that it really should be the core of libertarianism, that out here, organizations, individuals, et cetera, we do a better job of taking care of each other because it's not coercive. Right. Because it is, in effect, voluntary. And in here, they don't do a better job. So let's finally, for all of the world to see, pit them up against each other, and let the empirical facts show that we're right.
Okay, so let's talk about how we make that happen. So we talked about Arizona.
Yep.
That's obviously they have an income tax. I'm from California. Originally, that always sucked, paying California income tax, because it's horrible. But I live in Nevada now. There's already no income tax here, so that's not necessarily a plan. I think people would be concerned about their federal taxes. How do we move? What are the steps that we need to start taking to move towards presenting this sort of alternative on a federal level? Because that's obviously where most people's tax money goes at the end of the year.
It is where most people's tax money goes. I will address the local level thing for just a second,
Please.
though. First of all, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Gustave Le Bon.
The Crowd, right? He wrote The Crowd, yeah.
Awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
yes, The Crowd psychology, right? One of the things he actually covered was income tax versus consumption tax. It was really interesting. And he said he's really a statist. He really likes politicians, and he's advocating, telling them how to handle the people.
Right.
And he's like, never institute an income tax, because an income tax intrudes on people's lives. It makes them make certain decisions differently, and therefore it's easy for them to notice it and easy for them to revolt against it.
Clearly.
Instead, do a consumption tax, like a sales tax, because it only takes their money from them farthing by farthing, not interrupting their lives, and therefore you can take twice as much money from them than you ever could with an income tax. And so when we're talking about taxes, we've taken the Arizona model and we've modified it for the rest of the country, especially at the state level. That allows a state government, regardless of whether you have an income tax, which is primarily what it's derived around, or a sales tax. The big difference between income tax and a sales tax is who pays it to the government, right? It's the business.
Right.
So if you institute this in Nevada, right, you've got a bunch of businesses, then you're allowing the business to kind of choose where to direct their tax dollars, which charity to send their tax dollars to.
So the business can collect sales tax and then direct it at charities then.
And then directed at charities.
Okay.
Exactly. So the businesses would then be something along the lines of, look, we're redirecting, our sales taxes to this charity, and this is why you should donate to us. So now you're massively kind of increasing the amount of money going in that direction. But nonetheless, so you can do this at a state and local level all around the country. And I think most politics has to start local. People give or are taken from about $1.2 trillion locally. And about 2 or so on the state level. So I think we do need to start on the state level, start on the local level in order to get this implemented and in order to get kind of communities taking care of each other instead of the state. However, on a federal level, the way you get this implemented is you start, this is going to sound very cliche, but you start getting the groups that you know and work with to pressure their congressional representative to do something about this, particularly nonprofits. See, one of the things politically that most people don't do is identify who is their market, how much political influence does their market have to actually get this policy through. And I've not as much been interested in ideas, although ideas are good. I've been much more interested in how do you implement them, how do you actionably create things. And if you go to your nonprofit community in your area and go, I want taxpayers to be able to redirect money to you. They're going to go, what? Of course.
Right.
And nonprofits are one of the most kind of politically most powerful forces in the country. So if you go to them and say, you should be able to compete directly with the government for people's tax dollars, you have a ready and willing base. You have a really strong political force. And you need to bring those forces together on the federal, on the state, and on the local level if you're going to get something like this through.
That's a very great point. Very, very practical too, man. Just having them work in their own self-interest, right? It's like, hey, here's the plan to get you as much money as possible. I think a lot of them are going to go for that. So, all right. So in terms of, I'm sure people are excited about this. I mean, It's been an interesting sort of evolution of my own thought over the last 6-7 months. I'm certainly I'm a radical anarchist, radical voluntarist, but I know that there need to be people sitting at sort of every stop along the way. You know what I mean? And if people have practical skills to get us one step closer, or practical ideas to get us one step closer, then let's take that one step, because we're not going to get here in a giant leap. We're going to get here in like a series of steps. So I really like this. For people who are listening, what's the best way if they're like, okay, I want a little more help, some practical steps. I'm willing to take these next steps, as it were. What should they do? How do they get in contact with you? You know, you said that you're doing some new action plans. How can they be involved with that?
Absolutely. So our website, taxrevolution.us, has a lot of the information and a lot of the action plans on there. There are really three main ways that people can get involved and get engaged. As part of a support to make these universal tax credits kind of implemented all around the country, we are developing a website right now called socialsafety.net. I know it's a nice pun on the social safety net. But basically, it is a database of 1.5 million nonprofits in this country, what they provide and how people can access them in their community, as well as it will have a ton of highlights of all these great organizations and companies doing a better job than the coercive services they're competing up against. And sharing that, putting that information out there, adopting as your argument, not, oh, don't take the taxes from me, not making that your main argument, making your main argument, no. The purpose of taxes, the voluntary community does it better. Individuals, companies, organizations does it better. That is the number one thing, very important to argue. Number two, if people want to get engaged and see, you know what? I'd like to have a little bit more liberty, a little less government, bring the left and right together on taxes in my community, and actually have people outside the government start taking care of others and start with the UTC. We have UTC, or what we call Universal Tax Credit legislation, online, and people can go to taxrevolution.us and then go to the Contact Us link. We have a grassroots coordinator who'll get in touch with you, start working toward what to most radicals, I am completely aware, to most radicals is like, okay, meh. But for most people, putting the government in competition with these other organizations and saying, and these people do a better job, in the long run, that's going to be the absolute proof of liberty, that these people don't need to adopt the libertarian philosophy to agree with, and all of a sudden libertarians start winning their arguments, start winning the lower taxes that they want, while the community still gets taken care of, and that's really important.
I love it, man. I mean, I think this is very, very refreshing, and I think it's like you say, it is the place where I know right now, especially in the libertarian community, unfortunately, with this last election, there is a lot of this sort of left-right, squabbling, and people trying to like eke out their little place. But I do think that like real, true libertarianism isn't left or right, and it's looking for the solutions in the private market without coercion that can satisfy both sides. And I think you're really doing that really well. Well, before we say goodbye, was there anything else you wanted to add? I mean, you've given so much information, but is there anything else that you want to add, or even just about something that people should be looking out for on the horizon that you guys are paying attention to?
Absolutely. So a couple of important things, since we're a tax organization. Tax reform isn't happening this year, by the way. Just as an FYI.
Okay.
Like, don't expect it. Don't invest based on that.
Okay.
But that said, really what this comes down to for me is, and what it should come down to for people, for libertarians, for those who are listening in and watching, is there needs to be an empirical showdown between the voluntary sector and the government. We have the internet, we have all of these tools at our disposal, we have all of the data, we're able to gather all the data we need. There needs to be an absolute empirical showdown, so no one can ever say, as this is always the excuse for raising taxes, oh, we'll take care of more people. Well, if the empirical evidence shows, no, actually you don't, and you don't need any more tax money, not only will that stop tax hikes and please a lot of libertarians and conservatives, but it will really bring, like I said, the right and left together. And I'm reminded of the Calvin Coolidge quote, which is, I favor the policy of economy, not because it saves money, but because it saves people. Every dollar we take from those people is taking their life. I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but is taking their livelihood, is taking their blood, is taking their sweat, is taking their tears. And every dollar we carelessly waste means their life would be so much the more meager, where every dollar that we save means their life would be so much the more abundant. This is a tax revolution about people, not necessarily just about the taxes. It's about the end, not just the means.
Wow, that's great. This has been wonderful, educational, inspiring. Dan Johnson, Executive Director of Tax Revolution Institute. Thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll definitely have you again.
Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you, brother. So, Christian, very, very interesting, very cool. That's, as a solutions person, that's what I want. I want someone to lay it out, be like, here's a solution, here's a workable solution. Like, if you're going to take the political route, like, give me a real concrete thing that can actually be done.
That was great. Very, very well broken down.
Coherent.
So precise.
Coherent.
Yeah.
And that is the argument, right? I think it's the most difficult argument for voluntarists. It certainly is and it's one of the reasons why I don't call myself an anarcho-capitalist, because it just sounds like you have no soul.
Right.
You're an anarcho-capitalist.
Yeah.
You want people to, that's the idea. You want people to die in the streets. You don't care about anybody but yourself. You're just selfish. And it's like, no, I don't want the coercion of the state.
Right.
And the argument is always like, no, people will take care of people. I think it's, as he says, an empirical showdown. What a great...
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, so he's got that, I can't wait to see that socialsafety.net. And it's like, here are all the organizations that are taking care of people in the way. No, I don't want them to die on the streets. I just think these guys can do it better. And what a great argument that it's like, look, if I could help double the number of people with double the amount of resources than they're currently getting, wouldn't you rather that? Yeah. I mean, I think that's the argument that sways the left, right?
Yeah, that's
because
great.
Ultimately that's how the collectivist statists are they're anti-moral, because they're using people who are naturally left-leaning, open, compassionate people who regard others with a high level of compassion and a high level of empathy. They're using that compassion and empathy against them. Right? Yeah. Saying, we've got the only solution. If you don't go with our solution, then you're not a compassionate person. When it's like, no, there are, as Thomas Sowell said, there are no solutions. There's only trade-offs. It's to prove, no, the government doesn't do it better, but the government doesn't do anything better.
Yeah.
It's just that in this sector, in this particular sector, the sector that is, we have arguments, and it's brought up that like, yeah, traditionally it was charities that did blah, blah, blah. But it's not traditionally. They're doing it now. Like, you could just take the money that's over here, just move it over here. The organization is already there. Like, they're ready to do it.
Yep.
But at the same time, you see government, like, making it illegal. Like, to go and bring food to the homeless, to do like Food Not Bombs or like Meals on Wheels or whatever for the homeless in Skid Row in Los Angeles is illegal.
Crazy.
You will get a misdemeanor citation and perhaps arrested for taking food to hungry people.
But that's where your tax money is going.
Well, your tax money goes to the police who are patrolling it. And it goes to, the reason why they do that is because there are a few monopolies, the missions that are down there, that they're the ones in collusion with the state, like he said. They're basically an arm of the state. They're the only ones that get, and they have all these things that you have to do associated with it. But when it's like, no, real competition.
Yep.
Lower the barrier to entry. Lower the barrier to entry.
It's brilliant.
I mean, I think that it's, at the very least, it's a great opportunity to get people thinking about these concepts. Now, the state being what the state is, you know what I mean? Like, it's all, my belief is that no matter what you feed them, no matter how you try to improve it, that the state will always come in and fuck it up. But at least in this scenario, if you start an industry, Machiavelli said, people will never get upset your subjects. He's writing in The Prince. He's writing, as Le Bon was writing to advise the politicians of how to deal with the crowd. You know, Machiavelli in The Prince is writing to nobles, aristocracy, to tell them how to rule, you know, particularly Italians, to tell them how the right way to rule the people. And he says, look, the people will never get upset because you don't give them something. They'll only get upset when you give them something and then take it away. So I'm all about, if we're going to get to the place that I want to be, a stateless society, I'm all about, let's get it to a point where the state has given people a lot, and then if they want to make a change, then they have to take it away. Take away an industry. I think it draws us right back to the situation that's happening with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
As more and more investor money comes in, it's going to be like, you're going to start having because there are institutional investors who are invested in Bitcoin, who are promoting Bitcoin, the big banks and whatnot. Oh, what, you're gonna turn them into terrorists? Like, what? You know what I mean? Like, that's why they've got to act now.
Yeah.
Because the people get mad when you take something away.
The one thing I kept thinking about throughout this whole show, I think you said it, where, you know, you have a technology like the horse and carriage, and then the car comes out, and it's obsolete. How do you go back to using a horse and carriage? And I think that's where we're at right now with a lot of these things.
You don't, and I mean, you can't even, the idea that you're even going to regulate that, the idea that, look, I would say there's one time in history that it happened, but the fact that it happened shows what is required. And the one example would be the Portuguese brought guns to the Japanese islands. And the Japanese adopted guns for a little while, and then it was feudal Japan at the time, and they were fighting against each other with guns. And all of the feudal lords got together and basically banned guns. And I believe guns were completely banned from Japan for something like 150, 200 years. Maybe.
Wow.
And that's the one, and they went back to fighting with swords, even though all the whole world around them was fighting with guns. But they had managed to ban it, and none of the other ones picked up guns to fight. It's really amazing that would happen.
Right.
But what it requires, I mean, you're talking about feudal Japan, you're talking about the land of the samurai at that time, you're talking about this very coherent, old, established culture that was filled with all of these sort of very rigid ideals, and a homogenous people, you know, that were keeping outsiders from getting in and killing any outsiders to come in. Like, that's what you basically have to do, that level of protectionism, if you want to prevent these things. But we don't live in that culture. We live in a global world.
Right.
So they're done. They're done, but they can't just let it go. They're going to fight it till the bitter end, man. And the problem is they've got all the guns.
Yeah. The media.
I mean, I think even the media is going to start falling apart, man. I mean, more and more independent media. Again, we've got. I mean, you look at the space that we're in. It's only getting easier to broadcast, and the audience that you can acquire. I mean, I was checking out. Well, we were in here with the Joe Rogan live, and how many people did I say were watching him live?
800,000 or something like that.
It was stupid, right? No, it wasn't 800,000, but it was in the tens of thousands. It's like 48,000 or something. We're watching his YouTube live stream, and it's like, dude, that for the return on investment, like, what does it cost Joe Rogan to do his show at this point?
Yeah.
Like the rent on his spot, if he doesn't own it outright, which he probably does, and the electricity and the internet. Well, the equipment's paid for. You know what I mean? It doesn't take long to pay off the equipment. Like, when you look at that, it's just, again, better, faster, cheaper. Better, faster. Like, you can't compete it. So, like, all of these things are coming. This is the crypto savages, and I think we need to be working hard. And one of the reasons why I'm having someone on like Dan Johnson, you know, who is, you know, what would be classified as a minarchist for sure, libertarian, but somebody who's trying to actually move the chain right? Who's trying to move the ball down the field and is like, okay, we need this 1 yard running play first. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If before, he's not going for the long bomb. He's going for let's march it down the field and score,
Right.
Which is a great strategy. That's a winning strategy. You take a little piece of land, a little piece of land, a little piece. The reason why myself, I am a radical anarchist for sure. And I live my life that way. But it's not a time for us right now to be separating ourselves out. Those of us who believe in this thing, it needs to be a big tent. Because when the state starts to fall apart, believe me, the statist tent is a big fucking tent. The number of people that work for the government, the number of people that rely on the government for their sustenance, for their income, for their children's education, for their health care, the number of people that can be scared by propaganda of these people out here like us who want to take that all away. The crypto savages. That's why we need to be presenting coherent arguments that don't sound crazy to these people. It's about hearts and minds. The war is on. The battle is on. This is it.
That's great.
This is it, man.
Yeah, there's so many things that just ran through my mind right now as you said that. One of the things, if you're we don't want to argue with them,
Yeah.
we want to question.
Right.
We want to produce another question, and we want to create, as opposed to trying to be the resistance and fight and all this stuff.
Because we were there.
Yeah.
I mean, I know very few people. Look, like Dan said, I was a neocon.
Yeah.
I know very few people who were raised by principled anarchists or libertarians and are second generation libertarians. You know what I mean? There's very few people like that. And so we all were there. So why do we keep forgetting that?
Yeah, exactly.
Why not help them?
Exactly.
Because help them walk along that path. Because if somebody would have came at you with what you would have at that time thought was some crazy shit, but which is now what you believe, it's a slow process of waking someone up. It's Plato's allegory of the cave, where he says, once your chains are broken and you realize that thing that you are seeing in front of you is really just a puppet show.
Yeah.
And then you're in it and you realize I'm in a cave. When you get up to the light, it's blinding. You don't want to blind people. You need to give them some sunglasses and take it slowly. Turn the light up little by little by little.
Slowly show them the mirror.
That's right. And it's got to come from inside of them.
Exactly.
It can't come from outside. You can't tell them to read Rothbard. You know what I mean? It's got to be simple. So, I hope that that's the type of service that we're bringing to this whole thing. I think we are.
Yeah.
I think we are, man.
It's great.
So I think we're running up on, it's just about time, man. Thank you for today, dude.
Thank you.
Great show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me say goodbye to the people. Well, I think today was a great show. We're definitely going to be following all of the stories that we covered today. I think there's going to be so much more info on this Seth Rich thing. That's a big, big story. And cryptocurrency is not going away. Again, countermarkets.com. Go get your free issue. If you're really not up on the cryptocurrency markets right now, even if you've only got a little bit of money, it's the place to be. Like I said, if you had bought $100 worth of Bitcoin in 2010, you would have $73 million worth of Bitcoin now, 7 years. So that's the type of information that we're trying to bring you, because we're crypto savages. We're out here on the edge. And if you want to check out the archive of this show, you can do that on iTunes and Stitcher as a podcast. You can check out the full video version, of course, on youtube.com/Vin Armani, or you can go to youtube.com/activistpost and you can get all of our best of little chunks where we break up the individual segments, and we will have this week that great interview with Dan Johnson as a standalone piece for you to share with your friends and perhaps convert them and move them slowly on to the path. We'll be doing our job as best as we can And we will do it again next week, next Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, right here. And until then, stay free.